What's up, everybody? Welcome to On the Record, a punk music podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Alex Newman, alongside Ben Brennan. What's up, Ben?
Not much.
On the Record is a fan podcast where we discuss the Fat Records catalog album by album, side by side, chronologically. We have no true music expertise. We're just some friends shooting the shit about albums we loved growing up. Ben, looking forward to talking to you about Face to Face's Don't Turn Away. But first, can you remind me why we decided on such a daunting quest?
Because we don't want to be disconnected from our youth. If you've got a problem with that, I'm not afraid. Walk away 1,000 times.
That was a very relevant face-to-face themed intro. Thank you.
Like Mad
And
Libs.
yeah. And with that, let's get into the liner notes.
Yeah, let's see the information about who made this album. So the album is Face to Face, Don't Turn Away. We're talking about the Fat Records release that came out on January 17th, 1995. However, it was originally released in 1992 on Dr. Strange Records. So the band lineup at the time was Trevor Keith on vocals and guitar, Matt Riddle on bass and backing vocals, and Rob Kurth on drums. It was recorded at West Beach Recorders, October 1991, and Anarchy Studios, August 1992. It was engineered by Don Cameron at West Beach Recorders, Jim Goodwin at Anarchy Studios, and was produced by Face to Face. Anarchy Studios. That's like that's a name.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that one. So the first thing that I'll say about this record is the number of tracks on this one that were it's not quite split how they recorded it, but 4 or 5 of them were I've got it listed out here which ones were done in 92 versus 91. So out of the 13 tracks, 5 of them were recorded in 1992. But it's remarkable how I couldn't tell. I didn't know until you look it up and you're like, oh, they did
I
a
wonder
really good job
if
keeping everything feeling like it all belonged. They're recorded almost a year apart, and everything feels like it all fits together still.
it does. I wonder if you can tell stylistically in terms of the differences between the songs.
I mean, I couldn't really. I mean, other than the fact that one of those songs or a couple of the songs were just or better than some. I don't know. It's pretty evenly split across both recording sessions, in terms of the quality of the songs too. But before we get into that, just some background on Face to Face, because I think it's relevant because this record is coming sort of at the beginning of I guess the more mainstream skate punk sound, because they were among that first crop of more pop oriented SoCal punk bands, and that allowed them to make the jump to the mainstream. Even though they never hit it as big as other bands like The Offspring, who they actually came up with, because they played a lot of shows with them in those early years, from what I've read. But I think that Face to Face was, they're pretty influential, at least in those early years, because you can hear that sound that they're using here, sort of pop up in other bands that come after, or other records that come later from other bands.
Yeah, one thing that it kind of reminded me of sound wise was some of that Bay Area poppy punk
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, it definitely does feel like something like Lookout might have put out too in some
Yes,
ways.
yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I haven't listened to this record in quite some time, but at one point I definitely listened to it pretty heavily. Um, but coming back to it, I was initially disappointed when I revisited it because it didn't feel like as many of the songs were standing out the way that they did. Um, and I'm not sure why that is. But after listening to it, 5 or 6 times, it started to not be so like disappointing anymore. It's sort of like I had to like reacquaint myself with all the songs before I could get back into it. But
I
after
can
listening to
definitely
it a
see
bunch,
that.
yeah, after listening to it a bunch, I came back around on it, and I was like, oh no, I still do really like this record. Um, but it does feel, and feel free to jump in here, but it does feel homogenous in terms of its style, and uh, things do bleed together if you're not really paying close attention.
Oh yeah. That was definitely something I experienced. It definitely kept writing. Was this the song that was on Fat Music for Fat People? When I was taking notes on the record.
I think that's
Um,
fair. Like a lot of these songs do sound very similar. But on the whole, some things that I really like about the record. Number one is actually the guitar tone. I like the way it sounds.
oh, for
Um,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, really, really great. It feels so of its time in a really good way. And I do really like that you can hear so much of the bass sort of punching through on so many of these songs.
Yes.
Um,
Very bouncy.
yeah, yeah. And you know what I really like is on this record, they are a trio and they sound like a trio. I
Yes.
really like that because I can see how, like, after this record, they add another guitarist, which that's, I'm all for that. That's great. But I do really like it when a trio records a record and they don't record extra guitar tracks to sort of beef up the sound. I actually really like that they just kind of work with what they've got, even though they could have added another guitar track if they wanted to. Uh, and I think that sort of makes it like it's been stripped down to the bare essentials, and it's not trying to be more than what it is. And it's just straightforward and catchy, and I really like that about it. Um, and I will also say, points to Face for being one of those few Southern California bands playing melodic punk in the early '90s without directly cribbing Bad Religion. We've talked about it, you
Yeah.
know, ad nauseum at this point, because so much of these early records that we're talking about are so heavily influenced by Bad Religion, and for good reason, because Bad Religion was really fantastic. Um, they were just it's really hard to get away from a band that was just like so big within the scene at that time. Um, but this record in particular feels much more influenced by something more of like a Descendants influence than Bad Religion,
Yes. Yeah.
which
Um,
again another band that a lot of these bands from this era are going back to and drawing from for good reason.
One thought I have about this record is it would not seem out of place if it had come out and Fat put it out in the 2000s with like the rest of the Fat roster at that time.
Mm, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it still fits because I think for a long time, a lot of like the releases that Fat had very much fit within the sort of narrow genre, um, and they maybe branch out a little bit more as time goes on and bring in sort of different bands. But it's kind of like mostly poppy skate punk type stuff.
Yeah. Like for most of the 90s, that's what it's like. So this is kind of a nice contrast with that. And I think it would be, I don't know, I feel like it would be more, at home with like, you know, when the label's putting out like the Lawrence Arms and Dillinger 4 and Against Me, um,
Yeah,
than with all those skate punk bands at the time.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's just because this record does share more in common with pop punk than it does with melodic hardcore than the crossover. Whereas,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
we're talking, we talked about Lagwagon and NoFX and Strung Out, and those all definitely have more of that metal influence that's bleeding into the music.
Yeah, very much so.
Um,
And this,
yeah,
yeah, there's like maybe like one or two songs on this that sounds a little metal, but like, yeah, it.
yeah, and like these guys had originally started as a metal band in the late '80s, and then before they really became Face to Face, and then some people left the band, and a bunch of things changed, and they originally, I think um they changed their name to like Zero Tolerance, which I guess there was a demo at some point, but they never released a record, and then um yeah, just more lineup changes, and then they kind of landed on this little trio, which is what they went forward with and recorded this record. Um, so we don't have to start at the top, but like on side one, what are your standouts? Like, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with Disconnected? Because that's the single from this record, if you want to call it that, even though Disconnected was actually re-recorded for the record that came after this.
I read about that. Yeah, I mean, I thought that song was really fucking good. It sounded really familiar, but I'm still not sure how I ever heard it. Um,
Was that one not on Fat Music?
I don't. I think it was the song I Want that was on Fat Music.
Oh, okay.
But they sound like similar songs.
Right. I like both those songs.
Yeah, yeah, they're
But I
good.
think Disconnected truly is one of the big standouts on
It's
this
it's you.
album.
It's You've Got a Problem is the one that's on.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Um, which is another one of my favorites from
Yeah,
side
yeah,
one.
yeah. I was gonna say those are very, very good songs.
They really
Um,
are. But like, Disconnected, yeah, it's a real standout for a bunch of reasons, but I really like the background vocal track and the chorus, and um and it's very typical in terms of lyrics for this record, because if you look at the lyrics as a whole, they very much have like it's very a very strong theme. Um Almost everything is about ties back to sort of like personal responsibility. Um there's there's a lot of talk that sort of goes back to that. Um, and it's definitely more of like uh, a theme of talking about external conflicts rather than like internal. Um, just a lot of things about how you're perceived in the world, and a lot of talk of keeping an open mind, which is good. I like all those themes. Um, and you know, Disconnected in particular has some of one of my favorite like uh lyrics from the record, and it's trust is something that comes easy when you've never been a victim. Lies and promises and words are said. It's your decision to accept them. And I think it's very true, and I really like it. So Disconnected, definitely one of my favorite songs on this record.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that's definitely one of the better songs.
Um Keeping with the theme of the lyrics, "You've Done Nothing." There's like it's a good opener. Definitely sets the tone. Um, but I really like that some of the lyrics, particularly it's the part that says, "You've got brains in your head, feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any way you choose." All of that was actually lifted directly from Dr. Seuss's book, "Oh, the Places You'll Go," which is kind of funny. Like, I'm not sure what caused him to do that, but I thought that was just kind of entertaining.
Who do you think the you is in all of these songs?
I think it's a fair question. because I'm inclined to think that a lot of the times he's actually directing the question at himself.
Yes. Well, I kind of have always gotten the impression of the name of Face to Face, like face to face with yourself in the mirror. I guess they have an album cover like that, right?
Yeah, the self-titled is that exact thing. But
And so
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that always in my head, I've always associated that like you're coming face to face with yourself.
Yeah, and I think that definitely fits with the theme of the lyrics on this record. And it's a nice touch, honestly.
Yeah.
Another thing that I noticed, just like looking at the lyrics as a whole, like this like constant asking of questions. Like there actually is like one of the songs we'll talk about later is like mostly questions, like just asking questions. But like I was just struck by reading the lyrics and realizing it was like, oh wow, he really like always him asking a question of some kind. And I think that makes me, reach that conclusion that he actually is just like talking to himself about these things.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean it's an approach that we haven't really seen in terms of lyrics at this point, but it's cool.
I feel like Lagwagon and Strung Out eventually start doing that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
In later records, that becomes more common with both of them.
yeah, for sure. Um, is there Well, are there any other standouts for you on side one, or maybe if you want to move on to some of the songs, maybe you just weren't as into?
Well, I know I really didn't like the way that You've Done Nothing started. Um, I don't know, it didn't work for me.
Oh,
And
you just don't like the 1 2 1 2 3 4.
whatever, like it was like this kind of like abrupt, almost like cliche, like punk album start. And I was just like, oh, rubbed me the wrong way.
I mean,
So
it's a very Ramones way to start a song.
yeah, yeah. No, I think I've got like my more negative opinions really are towards the end.
Yeah, I do think that side one is stronger than side two.
Yeah.
Um,
Like I looked at that side two list, I was like, that's a fucking great like 12-inch EP.
yeah. Um, yeah, it's just like just top level comments about some of these songs. I'm Not Afraid. That the intro to that song, like if you played it for me, I would have a very hard time saying whether it was Face to Face or No Effects. Like it really feels like something from like Punk and Drublick.
Mhm.
This intro. And or I mean like but then like you could also say that about like you could throw a bunch of other bands in there too. Like if you just only heard that intro, you might just be like, I don't know who that is. Um, but it feels like before Face to Face, you wouldn't have said that. Like Face to Face did that, and then sort of like a bunch of other bands came in and was like, "Oh, I like that." It was just like it's got like a certain style to it. Like it's the guitar tone as well. Um, but it really does. It feels like such a '90s skate punk sound at its real core. Um, yeah, I really like You've Got a Problem. That's one of my favorites from this side.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Definitely I think my favorite. Yeah.
Oh, that one's your favorite?
Maybe. I can't remember now. I think it's You've Got a Problem. I like again,
Yeah,
it's a very good song. It's a very good trick for the pony.
right.
Um, but they do kind of blend together in my head.
Yeah, they do. Um, and then Everything is Everything. I really like the the general sentiment of the lyrics in that song, just about the inevitability of one's life changing constantly. The lyrics are, I'm tired of running these circles in my life. I've seen the future. It changes before my eyes. And I know there's something that's going to change my life. I know my life will change again. Just because, like, I really feel that on a day-to-day basis. Because sometimes it just, you go through periods of time where everything seems to be changing a lot. And just sort of like the struggle of dealing with the fact that things won't stop changing. But like as far as the song goes, I it's just not terribly memorable in terms of the music. There's like a nice like bass solo and interlude towards the end that breaks things up, but that one, aside from I think the lyrics are more interesting than the song on that one. And I thought if there was one song on side one that I didn't need, it's No Authority.
Yeah.
It just didn't really do a whole lot for me. Like, you're already kind of like, by the time you get to No Authority, which is track 4, I'm already feeling like, oh, didn't I already hear something very similar to this already? Um, but you know, I like some of the lyrics in that one too. You know, it says, "We live by consequences. We never seem to get it right. Conflict of circumstances. And sometimes we may lose a fight." Um, yeah, again, just like very, very focused on personal responsibility, which I like. Um, so that is side 1. Do we have any more comments about any of these songs?
I don't think so. We can flip it over. Well, not quite yet. We can
Do some
take the
shout
needle,
outs?
take the needle off, do some
Yeah.
shout outs.
Well, this time around, we're gonna do a shout out. So our shout out, we were talking before we started recording about how great Trader Joe's is, which if you're, you know, where I am in Southern California, Trader Joe's is everywhere, and it's great. Easily my go-to grocery store. So many great items. This is not an ad for Trader Joe's, but I do love Trader Joe's.
You want to pay us, Trader Joe's?
Yeah. Trader Joe's should sponsor this podcast. It'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Trader Joe's. They just put one in across from where I work, so very excited about that.
Yeah, there's
And
only like a couple in your area, right? Like
that's
one or
the
two.
second. That's the second one, I believe, and like unless you count like Dayton or like there might be something like up near Mason at this point, but near me, that's the second one that's opened up.
Man, Kroger must really have like a stranglehold on the grocery store scene over there.
Yeah, I mean, why would you go to anybody fucking else? all hail Kroger. So I bring a game.
Oh, yes.
So the game is going to be called Original or Reissue. We were getting a little bit into like the technical details of what constitutes a reissue versus other things, but basically the concept here is: did the record label in question originally put out the record, or did they reissue it or put it out later on? All right. So I've split these up by record labels. So there's 3 labels we're going to talk about. The first one is going to be Epitaph.
Okay.
So the first record from Epitaph here is Poison Idea, Feel the Darkness. Is that an original or a reissue?
Reissue.
Yes. Second one, No Effects.
Where was it originally released?
Oh, I forget.
Did it?
I forget.
No.
I mean, I was only originally acquainted with it from Epitaph.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. No Effects, Liberal Animation.
Reissue.
Correct. I believe that was Mystic Records, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I believe it was. The infamous Mystic Records, of which we talked about not too long ago with RKO.
Bad Religion, How Could Hell Be Any Worse?
That's an original release.
I'm pretty sure it's, if not one of their 7 inches, is the original Epitaph release too.
I think that's right. I think that was the very first Epitaph.
Okay. So now we're going to move to the East Coast, at least in terms of the location of the record label.
I'm probably not going to do as well on this one.
So this is Revelation Records.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to put some more difficult stuff in there for you.
Yeah, it's gonna get me on
So
these.
first one is Judge's New York Crew EP, original or reissue?
Mm. What's the original?
It's a reissue. It was originally put out on Schism.
Okay.
Inside Out, No Spiritual Surrender.
Original.
Correct.
I know that one.
Warzone, Don't Forget the Struggle, Don't Forget the Streets.
Reissue?
Correct. But it was like reissued way later after it came out in like 2016.
Whoa. Wait, like, so did it just go like out of print on the other label?
Yeah, I think so. It was out of print for a while, I think, and they just
Mm.
reissued it then.
Okay.
Okay, so then the third label is now Nitro.
Oh,
So
okay.
Nitro Records.
Mm-hmm.
So back to the West Coast. First album is TSOL, Beneath the Shadows.
Oh man. Reissue.
Correct.
All right.
I'm very fucking good at this.
I
The
mean, there's definitely been some guesses in there, but yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
The Offspring by The Offspring.
That's a reissue.
That is a reissue. And the last one, Guttermouth, Friendly People.
Oh. That was their first one. So that's probably a reissue, right?
Incorrect. It's an original.
Oh, really? So like, oh man. For some reason I thought that was wow, okay.
So 7 out of 9, you know, if this was a classroom, I'd pass you.
Glad that I passed. That was fun. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Seems like a good game that we can start doing, or other games. I don't know, to think of other record labels.
There's so many like games we can play, and I think that's as long as the audience is into it, I'm having fun playing them and making them. But we've definitely discussed some pretty fun game ideas that we won't reveal here. But
even if they're not, I feel like you kind of have to have some degree of, tension or aggression towards the audience. So I think we'll keep doing them anyways, even if the audience doesn't want it. Because, like, we're doing this for ourselves, assholes.
Yeah. Did you hear that, audience? Fuck you.
I'm the heel podcaster.
All right, let's move to side 2 here.
Side 2. How did you feel about the vaguely reggae part in Pastel?
Oh, I thought the Pastel was. It's not one of my favorites on this record, but I like that one changes up the sound a little bit. Because he does like Rob Kurth does switch to I don't know if he's like hitting like the cymbals when they're like close. This is where not having any kind of musical experience is really showing. 'Cause I have no idea, but like it's like he's sort of hitting the cymbals and like it's not like making that crash sound. It's just more of like a tink tink tink. I don't know if it's probably not the like a cowbell, but I think it's the cymbals. But it does sort of change things up compared to most of the other songs on the record a little bit.
I do think these 92 songs, so Pastel, Nothing New, and Walk Away are 92 songs, right? These all kind of do sound a little different from what they recorded in 91.
Yeah. There's probably I think there's definitely some sort of small differences. But I was really just saying like on the whole, like if you told me that before I listened to it, like I still probably wouldn't have been able to pick out exactly which ones were different.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Everything goes together really, really well.
Yeah.
And you know what? I've seen Face to Face, I think twice. And both times I was like really impressed with like they're one of the few live bands that I've seen, and I came away thinking, wow, that sounds exactly like the record. Like,
Ooh.
no difference. Like, just so tight. Like, really, I mean, very few bands do that. And I don't know what that says about them necessarily. Just like very technically very good. Um, but it is impressive because you don't usually hear that. It's like you see a band live and you're just like, yeah, I mean it's really close to what they recorded, but like there's always going to be differences. But like both times I saw Face to Face, I was like, wow, it just sounds exactly like the recording.
Do you think
Um,
it's that they don't like dress up I mean, the recording sounds on this at least like a bit more raw than like a lot of the other fat stuff we've heard so far. Do you agree or
yeah, maybe a little bit. But it's such like a focused record too because
Mhm.
all these other records that we've listened to, um, there've been like certain areas where you're like, okay, maybe this what they're doing in this song doesn't really work, but a different song sort of like shows like where they end up. Like, some Lagwagon songs where we picked out some of those songs and thought, yeah, you can see what direction they're headed. But when you listen to this record, it's like they're already there. They don't
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This
they
is
don't
a
change. Like there's no song on this record that makes me think, "Oh yeah, this sort of like shows the direction of where they go later." No, I mean it's all here. Um and sort of it feels fully realized for what they are. Um and that's cool. But when it comes to side 2, which I think this has some of the songs that I just would have maybe rather have them cut. But I'm Trying is probably my favorite on this side. Um, yeah, this is one where you can really hear that bass uh, coming through. Um, and it does this is one where the lyrics I'm maybe like and not entirely sure what direction he was heading on it. He's talking about societal issues like homelessness and violence, and maybe like, and I think he's trying to like understand why they happened. But I found this line interesting where he says, "And you can keep your faith because I'll just walk away." And I don't really know what if he's like, maybe he's referencing religious people who talk about these societal problems and they're just like, "Oh, what can you do?" Um, I'm not really sure. Like,
I
what
mean,
exactly he's getting at here, but,
I would
I thought it was interesting.
I would almost wonder instead of faith as religious, like faith in humanity, which makes the song a bit more dark too.
You know what? You might be right about that. I didn't really think about
Because
it
like
that
with
way.
what he's the instances in that song that he's talking about, right? Like
Yeah,
4-year-olds getting shot.
right.
Uh,
Yeah,
I'm just gonna walk away from my faith or just walk away from humanity. Uh, there's no
yeah.
reason for me to stay. Like he's trying to be open minded about the human race itself.
And, yeah, I think that tracks with the rest of the record, so you might be on point there.
Yeah, yeah. Um, wow. Yeah. I thought that the music on that one was fine. Um, but yeah, lyrics to this one were good.
Yeah, I think I really liked the melodies on that one. That's what made me really enjoy it. Um, and then Walk Away is, really, like, catchy, fun track. There's, like, that, like, sort of, like, distorted guitar slide towards the end that has, like, a really nice flourish to it. Um,
See, for me, at the point that we get to like walk away and do you care, I was just really feeling like the sequencing of the record could have been better to like kind of break up like
yeah.
how
Well,
things sound. I was very
yeah,
fatigued
right.
once I got to that point.
And this record is, I'll say it's too long. Um, it comes in at 37 minutes, and I feel like it would have been better served if it would have been cut down to just under 30.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I just think 13 songs is too much uh for the sound. It really would have benefited from more brevity.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's songs like Nothing New and 1000 Times. Just I just think that we could have cut those. They didn't need to be.
Really? Oh, I thought that 1,000 Times was like a very good closer for the record.
Oh, wow. Um that one didn't feel like a great closer to me. It almost felt like an afterthought to me for some reason.
Huh.
No. Not what did you like about it?
You know, I don't know. I just it was kind of like
Yeah.
a, oh, this is. I mean, maybe it was just that the record was done. Could have been, but like I just felt like, oh, this is like a good end to this album. Like it felt like a good conclusion.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe if you had cut a couple of the songs on this side, it would have felt even more so. You know,
Yeah.
because again, you by the time you get to that last song, you're pretty tired.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But yeah, I mean, like when it comes to this side of the record, I'll maintain that like I'm trying and walk away are probably the ones I liked the most. Um, but it just especially something. The only real comment I have on like Nothing New is that it just feels like it could have been left off, and the title of the song kind of says it all. It's like you get to track
Yeah,
10, you get to track 10, you're like, okay, well, this is another song on this record.
I
Um,
definitely had that thought.
yeah, yeah, that's just where I ended up on that. Um, but yeah, was that that's pretty much everything I had to say about side two.
Yeah, I mean, I also did not have a like the same kind of relationship with this album that you had. This is one of the first ones that we've covered that like I really, other than like I guess the songs that were on comps, have not heard much of at all. So
Oh,
I
okay.
don't have a ton to say about it at the moment.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about sort of like your overall thoughts when we get to the summary. But
Yeah.
before we get there, let's move on to our rival records, which I am very excited about. Um, so now that we've shared all of our opinions on Don't Turn Away, let's expand the conversation and go outside of Fat and bring in some other albums that came out around the same time. And we're gonna go back to the original time period of 1992 to pull in our rival records. Um, it just feels more appropriate to go back to 92 and not do 95. Um, so let's start with you, Ben. What record are you bringing?
All right. So as I was mentioning earlier, I felt like this record sounded a lot like a Midwest pop punk type record. And so I decided that the best rival record I could bring up for this is Screeching Weasel, My Brain Hurts. Now, disclaimer, Ben Weasel is an asshole. And I'm going to
Yeah,
leave
Joe
it at
Queer
that.
said it best.
Ben Weasel's an asshole. But, it's a very important record. So we're going to talk about My Brain Hurts. Listening to this again for the first time in a while, I felt like the similarities between this and the Face to Face record were very much in the form of, at least to me, like how bouncy, how much I guess like the bass is coming through on
Yeah.
both of these records.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then it's poppy, it's catchy music. I don't think that it's as similar to Screeching Weasel itself, though. But again, I think that like a lot of these bands that are considered to be like children of the Weasel in the Midwest sound a lot closer to Face than they do Screeching Weasel in a
Yeah.
lot of situations.
Children of the Weasel. I like that. And who would you consider to be children of the Weasel? Well, you talk about like
So
the copyrights.
yeah, or well, I guess they're a little closer. I was thinking even of bands like a Banner Pilot or something like that, like are off
Yeah,
with their
those.
heads.
I mean,
Those bands
those are all
sound a
Chicago
lot
pop
like
punk bands.
those all sound like freaking more like this Face to Face record to me than they do like Daddy Weasel.
Yeah. So for me, Screeching Weasel, My Brain Hurts is like it's an all-time pop punk classic. Like I love Screeching Weasel. At least this period of Screeching Weasel. Um, the you get further in and especially God, I mean they just released a record relatively recently in 2020 that I cannot recommend. Um, but these early records especially, but are all really good. But this is the one that I go back to a lot. I listen to this record fairly frequently. Like I go back to it a lot. It's it's just so catchy. Like almost every single song on this record gives you at least one or like five reasons to remember these songs. Um, like what are some of your favorites from this album?
So title track, I get that my brain hurts, my brain hurts, my brain hurts stuck in my head a lot. Cindy's on methadone. Veronica hates me. Um,
Veronica Hates Me gets stuck in my head like
yes.
all the time.
Teenage Freak Show, and then The Science of Myth and What We Hate. I think are both like that. Those are for me the songs I come back and listen to the most off of.
Those
My
are
brain
very
hurts.
interesting tracks. Like those are two of my favorites. Um, and I think it's interesting the placement of those two songs on the record.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
because they're directly like in contrast to one another. Because the Science of Myth, um, it's about accepting religion as like a valid way to get through the day, which I agree with. I am not a religious person by any means at all. Stone cold atheist, but I totally understand what he's saying here. At the end of the song, he says, "It doesn't matter if it's real or not. Some things are better left without a doubt. And if it works, then it gets the job done. Somehow, no matter what, the world keeps turning." And I've met plenty of people in my life that are religious, and it just helps them get through the day, and that's great. And then you go to What We Hate, and it actually has a criticism of religion in sort of favoring common sense. Um, so I thought that was just like an interesting contrast between the two. Um,
Yeah. No, I feel like I don't often think about how those two are jarring with each other because I guess I just think about them separately. And I'm like, yeah, these are both very like, okay things to get behind. There are even times that like the Science of Myth where I'm like, oh wow, he's getting like real fucking heady with this shit.
yeah, I think what I had read was that at that time Ben Weasel was very into Buddhism. He
Yeah,
mentions
no, well
Buddhism.
that's like I was getting like that vibe from it, and also this guy. Have you ever read or listened to any Joseph Campbell?
Yeah,
So for some reason, the Science of Myth, like what he's talking about in that song, made me think of the hero myth or whatever that Campbell talks about.
yeah, the hero with 1,000 faces.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Which never thought I would be talking about Joseph Campbell and Screeching Weasel together.
yeah, you know.
Uh,
Uh, this so okay, so we we can't go an episode, of course, without having at least one cover song, right?
yeah.
So that they cover I Can See Clearly by Johnny Nash. And you know what? It works.
It
I'll say
does.
it. I'll say it. It works. This is going to be maybe our first where we really like I like this version of the song.
Well, it's like Rancid covering Blitz. Screeching Weasel here is making it a Screeching Weasel song.
Yes. And it works so well.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I thought was interesting about this record is like seems like they employ a much more varied instrumentation than they usually do on other records. Am I often thinking that? Like you hear like what is it, organs on this record, don't you? Or at least some
I
form
think
of
that they
keyboard.
definitely they do use them here and there. But it has been a while since I've listened to like the two Screeching Weasel records that I always go to are My Brain Hurts and Anthem for a New Tomorrow.
Hmm.
And at least on those two records, you do hear like keyboards and synths and stuff. Um, but I think they still use them in some of the other records a decent amount, from what I remember. But it has admittedly been a while since I've gone back to some of those other records since I
I
just kind of
oh
found
man.
I found like the era of Screeching Weasel that I really like is the first half of the 90s is like that's where I'm at with them.
Yeah, I'm looking at the track list for Anthem for a New Tomorrow and thinking like I probably should revisit that one because
It's really
like
good. It's really good.
so some of the earliest Weasel songs I heard were like I Hate Led Zeppelin, I think was one of the first ones I sought out and still love that song. But then the I Can See Clearly cover was something I was able to get with like early downloading bullshit. And
Yeah.
then I Robot off of Anthem for a New Tomorrow.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's a weird one.
Oh man.
Um, but yeah, like just I mean this record just has so many really great songs. I mean, I love Teenage Freak Show. It's definitely the most Ramones song on this record because Screeching Weasel very much is, you know, it's Ramones core, right?
Yeah.
But Teenage Freak Show is like straight up very Ramones influenced. Um, but I love the synthesizer on that one. It's so fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then you got like, Fathead, which sounds like a Descendants song in a good way. Um, even though it's just like it's very silly, you know.
Mhm.
But oh yeah, the comment I was gonna make when you mentioned My Brain Hurts and how you like the song gets sort of stuck in your head. Um, this is a fun fact. The melodies from that song um were pulled from the theme song to Charles in Charge, the mostly forgotten sitcom starring Scott Baio.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm.
Um, and according to Jughead, one of the guitarists, that the last solo in the song is taken like directly from the theme to Charles in Charge. But like, but even the My Brain Hurts part sort of like recalls the Charles in Charge
I can
melody,
yeah, I can totally
which is
see
kind of
that.
funny. Just
Um,
it's a little unexpected to when I saw that. I was like, oh wow, amazing.
yeah, so My Brain Hurts is a good record. Listen to it or not. I don't care.
It's honestly that like when it comes to that style of pop punk, which is admittedly pretty specific in a lot of ways. This is absolutely one of the best ones that's ever been made. Um, I really love this record, but I did not bring Screeching Weasel. My Brain Hurts. I brought Samiam's Billy, and the first thing that I'll say about Sam is that they're just like they're a band that kind of evades being categorized is what I've sort of realized in thinking about them and how they fit into all this. Um, they're just they came up with Jawbreaker and Green Day out of the Gilman scene, but they didn't really fit in the same way that maybe those bands did. It's like they're always occupying this like middle ground between extremes, no matter which angle you come at them. They're not really punk, but they're not really emo. And when I'm talking about emo, I'm talking about it in relation to the time period of the early 90s, because emo keeps, as time goes on, people's definition of what emo is definitely changes a lot. But they're also like, they're too punk to be like a general rock band, and too catchy to be considered like intimidating or tough. And I think that's just like what makes them kind of hard to pin down what exactly Samiam is.
I feel like I would say that they're like a post-hardcore band. It's just the easy thing to say with that. Like,
Yeah, it's
you know,
because of like how they like let all that distortion bleed into the
yeah,
songs.
yeah, for certain. And like at this time, like Jawbreaker was even kind of veering into that territory with Bivouac.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like, but like in relation to Face to Face, the the reason that I wanted to bring this record is because it is very much within the same like general genre of Face to Face, but Sam I Am, it's interesting because Sam I Am is almost the complete inverse of Face to Face on this record. Um, because the songs are way more mid-tempo, um,
Mhm.
but it's the vocals and the melodies that I think made me think like, oh yeah, people that like Face to Face probably would have liked this record too.
Yeah, absolutely. I I totally. When you said, you're gonna pick Sam I Am, I was like, yep, that makes sense.
Right.
Like they don't sound alike, but like they're kind of alike. Like it's even the vibe. Like Sam I Am has the like morose, like
Yes.
maybe not quite like alcoholic, but like problem drinker, like rock vibe to it,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And Face to Face, particularly on that record, also seems to as well. Just this kind of morose, like, like I
Yeah.
guess,
It's but like even there where like I said before, like where Trevor Keith's lyrics for Face to Face were so much more like focused on like sort of like the external things that are happening in the world and outside of himself, and sort of like what he can do to be better. um Sam I Ams are way more introspective, way more like sad and like
yeah,
poetic. Like Jason Bebout's lyrics on this record are, man, you like read them, you're like, oh boy, there's some heavy feelings here. um but yeah, I do really, I like that the contrast. Face to Face is way more about, tight, succinct songs, and then Sam I Am is way more about creating an atmosphere. And I think that this album, Billy, is like, it's a step forward from the album before it, Soar. Um, and this for me, this is where Sam I Am starts, like in terms of like, I really love Sam I Am. I like every record, this one and then everything that comes after it, I think are all like really great records. um and this is the one where they start to find their identity as a band, and they kind of land on their sound that they end up evolving.
yeah.
Because like they're, and you can definitely, like if you're listening for it, you can definitely hear them pulling more influence from like Doughboys, in terms of
Oh
like
yeah,
the styles of like the way that like Sergei Lubikov's, he has like a very distinct style of guitar playing, to the point where like if you listen to some of the other bands that he's been in, you can almost like immediately identify him as being the guitarist. um At least I can anyway. It's like when I hear a song and it's like, oh, yep, you can hear that that's definitely his style. Um, which
oh yeah.
you can't always
Okay,
do that with people, right?
I was looking at those, and I definitely think that yeah, the guitars in Sam I Am and the guitars in Knapsack at least are very similar.
Knapsack, Solea, like especially. I mean, yeah, it's just, which that's a band that like I really really liked, but nobody listened to those records. But yeah, you can when he's in the band, you can really tell. But yeah, it's like another sort of like offhand comment here about this record, because I haven't listened to this one in a while. Because while this is sort of like where I start with Sam I don't usually go back to this one. Um, but kind of coming back to it, I uh, I was reminded so much of the Lawrence Arms, particularly Ghost Stories. You can really hear a similarity in the style of the like the sound of the guitars and stuff, which is kind of cool.
I can see
But
that. Yeah.
um, like talking about the actual songs, "Don't Break Me" is like as close as Sam ever comes to sounding like Jawbreaker. It really sounds very much like a Jawbreaker song.
Yeah.
He's like, Jason's vocals are like definitely like in that Blake Schwarzenbach realm of like gravelly but like still poppy. Um
Yeah. Yeah.
and like Jason's vocals are kind of like he really shows his range on the record. I think that where you could definitely say Face to Face was like, you know, very like a lot of the songs do feel very similar. You could say say the same about Screeching Weasel's My Brain Hurts to a degree. I think that record, there's a lot of variation within the style, but you get to Sam and like a lot of these songs are just kind of like very creative. There's um a song like Go Away where it's like that alternating quiet to loud gimmick, which I'm not so big on that. But I'm just thankful that that's a short song and that's only in the first half of the song because you really could have run that into the ground and they didn't. Because it's the song sort of evolves. But yeah, I think that overall there's a lot of good stuff here, but it does sort of fall off for me at the end. I don't know how did you feel the same way?
Yeah. And I mean, for me, I thought it was that it was just starting to sound similar. So I have a
Yeah.
opinion that to some degree, all three of these records sort of start to sound like the records themselves start to sound similar, not that across each other they do.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and I mean, when we were talking about this earlier, though, I think part of the reason with that happens with Billy is that like the stuff they're doing is like kind of complicated. There's like a lot going on in a lot of these songs at times. And so maybe that like blending together at the end is really just that you're just tired. Your ears can't distinguish things anymore. Um
Yeah.
is kind of why I think that that might happen towards the end of this record. Um
Yeah. Yeah, I mean this one definitely could have, we say this about everything, but like you could stand to lose a couple songs on this one. Um
I feel like
I,
there are people out there that like are gonna hate us for our stance on making records shorter. Um
I'm all about quality over quantity.
I
Always will be.
I'm all, I'm all about that with shows too. Like
Oh yeah.
probably people are gonna come for me with pitchforks, but my favorite bands should probably not play more than 45 minutes. And most bands should not play more than 20 minutes. I don't want to pay attention for that long. I leave I leave shows like plenty of times like before like the headliner finishes because I'm like, okay, I've had my 45 minutes, I'm done, I'm out of here.
Yeah, as time has gone on, I do agree. I almost always stay to the end. It's pretty rare that I leave early. Unless of course like, if I'm there to see the headliner, I'll probably stay to the end, but if I'm kind of like, like kind of a fan of the opener, I'll leave early. But I do tend to agree. I think most bands shouldn't play for longer than 45 minutes. I think that should be more than enough time.
Well, they also just really wish people would get faster at setting up. I guess that's like the other terrible part of going to shows for me is just like just dicking around while you wait for people to set stuff up.
You
Need
meet
to
people, you talk to people, it's fine.
I need to start Ubering to shows more often so that I can uh, get
So you can
drunk enough
drink,
that it does. Yeah, get drunk enough that it doesn't matter.
right? It's a luxury for sure. Um, yeah. What were did you have any like standout songs on Billy?
I don't think I did. Nothing that stood out to me like on later Sam I Am albums where there are very clearly
Yeah.
like
Oh yeah.
hits on those albums, and like there wasn't really a hit on this one for me. But I mean, I've listened to this record in the past, listened to it now. Like it's a
Yeah.
very, very good record. And if you like this face to face record, you should definitely check out Billy.
Agreed. Just a couple comments from me about some of these songs. The second track, well, I think it's sort of the first appearance of the band hitting on the sound that they develop going forward. Like there's a lot, a lot of the songs after this have that same feel, but like this is the first one where you're kind of like, if you listen to the later records, you're like, oh yeah, this is kind of where they landed on it. Um, and outside of that, um, I really like songs like Regret and Get Out. Um, and
Yeah,
then
I wanted to say Get Out was the one that stood out to me, but
I,
then I was like, maybe I'm thinking of something else. But yeah.
yeah, I really like Get Out. That's a good one. But then like some of the ones that don't work quite as well for me are like Hey Brother. That's probably the one that I'm just like, okay, let's maybe not do this. Um, which is like what's funny to me about that one is it's a song that hates on hippies, which we've had quite a bit of talk about hating hippies at this point. Um,
Oh, they're talking about a specific type of hippie in this too. It's not just like a hippie, it's like squatters with dogs
right.
bumming for money.
Yeah.
Um,
And it is supposed to be like he's very annoyed that you got somebody coming up to you constantly like asking you like, "Hey brother, can you spare some change?" And I think the way that they did the chorus on this one definitely it it gets it across. It is annoying because the chorus is kind of annoying. Um, it's I'm just not so into that track.
yeah.
Um, and then Homeboy is probably the most desperate song I've ever heard written about like breakfast cereal. Um, it's just it's just it's so strange the way that that one like he talks about Cocoa Krispies. Um, but it is definitely like a depressing song about just sort of like it's just tough to get up and move on with your day. Um, but it just the last couple of songs kind of don't do a whole lot for me. Um, but on the whole, this is a good record, and everything that Sam I Am does after this is way better.
Yes. Yeah.
They get s- steadily improved over time, which you can't really say that about every band. I mean, this is the band's third record, and a lot of times, third records are kind of like where you tap out. But this is sort of like them just getting going.
Yeah, I feel like for this style of music in particular, to like finally be like starting to hit your stride by like the third record is kind of nuts.
Yeah,
Because like, I can think of like certain types of indie rock or like certain like post-punk ish acts that are able to like evolve and get better with time. um but like, this type of music is not usually something that you could like if you either get it right the first time or it, it's a lot of struggling.
for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of these bands that we'll talk about, it is difficult to have a band do, in some cases, like Face to Face, 10 or 11 albums is kind of like, where do you go? Right? Unless you're constantly evolving, which is very hard to do. It's very hard for bands, and it's actually really impressive when a band is able to uh, evolve their sound a lot over time. But a lot of bands don't. A lot of bands kind of they reach like a comfortable sort of spot, and they just sort of iterate on what they've been doing, and that's why it makes like the later records feel like a little bit rote. Like, oh, been there, done that. I don't really need this, but like maybe a new fan would really like this. Um,
Yeah, I feel like you've got to be like hit a certain level of popularity probably to be able to like get away with doing that. Like where like you've got such a fan base that'll like buy whatever record you put out. You know, like they just like songs that sound exactly like the last record that came out. Uh,
yeah, I think there's a
that-
lot of bands that ride on that.
oh yeah, I there's definitely a lot of bands that ride on it, and like I feel like you know what that's it. If there are people out there that like just want to hear the same thing over and over again, like I don't think it's wrong to, you know, earn an income off of providing that to them. You know,
Not at all. No. Um, but yeah, it's more of just like it's a preference thing, you know. Like I always want to hear somebody like push their sound and do something more with it or evolve in some way. But like just for me personally, like as a listener, I don't want to hear you rewrite the same record 5 times.
yeah,
Uh, and that's just my opinion of it. But doesn't mean that there's no value in it or anything like that. It's just I just don't need it. But Sam I Am doesn't really do that. Sam I Am always like all their records have like their own flavor to them for the most part. And it's something that I really appreciate about that band. Um, so yeah, that's Billy. Check it out. It's a really good record. And then if you like that one and you've never really listened to any of their later stuff, definitely check out some of the later Sam I Am records, particularly You're Freaking Me Out and Astray, which Astray, I'll rope that one into one of these podcasts at some point when we get there. But Astray
Astray is a great
it is
record.
one of my all-time favorite records by any band. It like I could put that in a top 20 for sure.
Yeah, I even think Clumsy's very good too.
Yeah, that's a really good record. That was their one major label release.
Oh wow, I
So yeah,
guess
I mean
94 is the time.
Billy was good enough to get them that attention that a
Yeah.
major label came to them. But I would say Clumsy is all the ideas that are being expressed on Billy. Clumsy is where it really comes together. Like they really like that's where they figure it out, and they become the band that they are uh, for the rest of their career. But in summary, what are our? Do we have any final thoughts on Face to Face? We can go through. I've got my favorite tracks here listed out. Mine were Disconnected, You've Got a Problem, and I'm Trying. I think they're all really good songs.
Yeah, I feel like it's those three or the Disconnected, You've Got a Problem, and I think I Want.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's a good one too.
those are probably my three favorites off of this. And yeah, I think it's a good record. It's if you like the
Yeah,
music that you
how did you feel like coming in as
um
somebody who didn't really listen to this band at all?
I thought that it was okay. I mean, the songs I listed out, I'll probably occasionally listen to again
Mhm.
going forward. Um, but you know, I did kind of feel like, at least on this record, they kind of come across as like a little bit of a one trick pony, right? Like there's that like way that they were able to like structure a song like over and over again.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah, I think that Face to Face does improve over the next couple of records. But this is a for me like it holds up for the most part. I think I liked it a lot more years and years ago, but we're coming back to it. It's still really good. I still really like it. And if I was gonna, I would still cut at least 3 of these songs. I would cut No Authority, Nothing New, and 1,000 Times personally. But there's nothing on this record that I didn't enjoy. You know, like it's
Yeah.
all generally good.
Yeah, yeah. I think the worst I wrote about a lot of these songs was fine.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's fair.
Oh man.
All right, y'all. That's going to do it for this episode. If you've got any questions, comments, or more importantly, corrections on anything we might have gotten wrong, which is totally possible at this point, please email us at ontherecord@gmail.com so we can set the record straight in a future episode. And we'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about Good Riddance's debut album, For God and Country. Until then, thanks for listening.